There is a particular quality to January in Montana that is difficult to describe to anyone who has never felt it. It is not simply cold. It is the kind of cold that has weight, that presses against windows and bends the tall brown grass flat against the frozen earth. The sky over Great Falls in early January does not announce itself. It settles. Low, gray, enormous, the kind of sky that makes a person feel small in a way that is not poetic but true. The Rocky Mountains stand at the edge of the horizon like they have always been there and always will be, indifferent to everything that moves at their feet. In the winter of 1956, Great Falls, Montana was a town of about 40,000 people. It was an air-based town, meaning it had a particular rhythm. Young men in uniform moving through diners and drive-ins, staying for a season or two, then leaving, replaced by the next rotation. The community was tight-knit in the way that isolated places always are. People knew their neighbors. They waved from trucks. They recognized strangers. And on a Tuesday morning in January, some of that familiar sense of safety shattered so completely that the town would spend the next 65 years searching for the pieces. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoy true crime stories like this one, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who would love it too. It genuinely helps keep stories like this one alive. Lloyd Dwayne Bogle was 18 years old. He was from Waco, Texas, a young man who had enlisted in the United States Air Force and been stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base outside Great Falls. By all accounts, he was steady, good-natured, the kind of young man who meant what he said and showed up when he was supposed to. Then he met Patricia Kalitzke, and investigators who later studied the case would describe what happened simply and clearly. He was, in the words of Sergeant John Cadner, instantly smitten. Patricia, called Patty by the people who loved her, was 16 years old and a junior at Great Falls High School. Her classmates described her as bubbly, witty, and beautiful. The kind of person who made a room feel different when she entered it. She was the sort of girl who had friends easily not because she tried, but because she was genuinely warm. She and Dwayne had begun spending all their time together. They were the kind of couple who seemed, from the outside, like they belonged in the same story. In late December 1955, the Kalitzke family had Christmas together. Patty was there, as she always was, and Dwayne was part of it now too. The family described the couple as close and happy. There was talk, in the way there always is with young couples who are serious, of a future together. Dwayne was an airman from Texas who had found something in Montana he had not expected to find. Patty was a 16-year-old girl who had her whole life arranged in front of her like something still to be unwrapped. On the evening of January 2nd, 1956, the two of them left the Kalitzke family home together. They went to Pete's Drive-In, a local spot where witnesses saw them just after 9 o'clock in the evening. They were sitting together. They were happy. That is the last confirmed image of them alive. Two young people in the yellow light of a drive-in on a cold Montana night, together. What happened after that point would take 65 years to understand. On the morning of January 3rd, three boys were hiking along the Sun River near Wadsworth Park, northwest of Great Falls. It was a normal morning for them until it was not. They found a car parked along a lover's lane half a mile from the park. And near the car, face down on the frozen ground, was 18-year-old Lloyd Dwayne Bogle. His hands had been tied behind his back using his own belt. He had been shot in the head. Twice. The boys did not run. They walked. Or maybe they ran. Nobody recorded that detail, but the result was the same. The police were called, and the machinery of investigation began. Detectives arrived at the scene. They documented the car. They documented Bogle. Somewhere in the frozen ground near that cottonwood tree, two bullets had buried themselves so deep that it would take investigators 33 more years to recover them. The scene was quiet. The river moved slowly in the cold. There was no sign of Patricia Kalitzke. For one day, there was a small and desperate hope that she was alive somewhere. That perhaps she had escaped. Perhaps she had run. Patty's family spent that day in the specific agony of not knowing, which is its own kind of unbearable. On January 4th, a county road worker was driving along what is now known as Vineyard Road, north of Great Falls near an area called Hill 57. He saw something at the bottom of a 20-foot embankment. He stopped. He got out of his truck. He found Patricia Kalitzke. She was 16 years old. She had been raped. She had been shot in the head. The two people who had been sitting together in the warm light of Pete's drive-in less than 48 hours earlier had both been killed, their bodies left miles apart in the Montana winter. The town of Great Falls absorbed this information slowly, the way communities absorb violence they are not prepared for. Doors that had been unlocked were locked. Conversations lowered their voices. Mothers looked at daughters differently, that specific quiet fear settling in behind their eyes. The investigation began immediately. Dozens of officers. Hundreds of interviews. Every possible lead followed with the kind of urgency that cases involving young victims and no obvious motive always generate. The file grew thick. The names of suspects multiplied. Among them, staggeringly, was the name of James Whitey Bulger, the notorious Boston gangster who had actually been in Great Falls and had been arrested for rape in the city in 1951. His name was written into the file and studied carefully, then ruled out. 34 other suspects followed. Each one investigated. Each one eventually ruled out. Every lead reached its end before it became a conclusion. And at some point, the file went quiet. Cold cases do not officially die. That is one of the strange things about them. They sit in evidence rooms in cardboard boxes and manila folders, the physical residue of unanswered questions. In the Cascade County Sheriff's Office, the Kalitzke Bogle file did exactly that for decades. It did not disappear. It waited. In 1988, a detective named Phil Madison began working in the Cascade County Sheriff's Office evidence room. He came across the file. He came across the box. And he did what certain investigators do when they find something unfinished. He stayed with it. In 1989, investigators returned to the cottonwood tree near Wadsworth Park, where Bogle's body had been found, and recovered bullets that had been lodged in the wood for over 30 years. Those bullets were cataloged and stored. They were real, physical, verifiable objects, but without a suspect, they were answers to a question no one could yet ask. Then in 2001, Detective Madison made a decision. He took a vaginal swab that had been collected from Patricia Kalitzke's body at autopsy in 1956, preserved on a microscopic laboratory slide, and sent it to the Montana State Crime Lab for analysis. The technology to analyze such evidence properly had not existed in 1956. It existed now. What the lab found was small but devastating in its implications. A single sperm cell, not belonging to Dwayne Bogle, belonging to someone else, someone who had been there, someone who had been present at the moment of Patty's death, someone whose identity, for the next 20 years, remained completely unknown. The DNA sat in a database. It returned no matches. The FBI's national system, known as CODIS, searched and found nothing. The sample was real. The science was sound. And the man it pointed to simply did not appear. Madison retired. "A lot of different people had a turn at this," he said when he left, "and we just weren't able to take it to a conclusion." He did not believe it would be solved. In 2012, a detective sergeant named John Cadner took over the file. He read everything. He read newspaper clippings from 1956 that had been kept in the file alongside the official reports, yellowed and fragile, as if the town itself had been folded up and stored alongside the evidence. You had two young, vibrant individuals who were well-liked among their peer group, Cadner would later say. He felt the weight of it in the way certain investigators do, the weight that becomes personal without you meaning it to. In 2018, something changed. Not in Great Falls, but in California. A man named Joseph James D'Angelo was identified as the Golden State Killer through a technique that investigators had never used in criminal cases before. Forensic investigative genetic genealogy, sometimes called FIGG, worked by taking DNA from a crime scene and uploading it to voluntary genealogical databases, the same kinds of databases people use to find biological relatives or trace family trees. If the sample matched even a distant cousin, investigators could build a family tree outward from that connection, narrowing down the list of potential relatives until a single name emerged. It was not magic. It was mathematics and patience and extraordinary precision. But to the families of victims who had waited decades, it must have felt something like grace. In 2019, Cadner and the Cascade County Sheriff's Office partnered with a forensic laboratory called Bogle Technology. They extracted a new DNA profile from the evidence recovered from Patricia Kalitzke's body in 1956. They uploaded it to genealogical databases. And this time, a connection appeared. A familial match. A thread leading into a family tree. Investigators began to follow that thread. It led them to a name. Kenneth Gould. Gould had been a Great Falls native. In January 1956, he was 29 years old, a husband, a father, living approximately 1 mile from the Kalitzke family home. He was, by accounts at the time, an ordinary man. He was known to ride horses through the area, including along Vineyard Road near Hill 57, the exact stretch where Patricia Kalitzke's body had been found. His name was nowhere in the case file. He had never been interviewed. He had never been questioned. In 65 years of investigation covering nearly 3 dozen suspects, his name had never once been written down. Approximately 1 month after the murders, Gould sold his property near the town of Tracy and moved his family. Over the following years they moved again, from Geraldine to Hamilton, and eventually out of Montana entirely, moving to Missouri in 1967. They never returned to Montana. Investigators found no criminal history for Kenneth Gould. What they did find was one other detail, quiet and chilling in its specificity. When Gould was 25 years old, he married a girl who was 16. The same age Patricia Kalitzke had been the night she was killed. Kenneth Gould died in Oregon County, Missouri, in 2007. He was cremated. There was no body to exhume, no confession to extract, no court to charge him in. When investigators approached his surviving children and explained what the DNA evidence suggested, the children cooperated. They provided their own samples. The familial match was confirmed. On June 8, 2021, 65 years after the night Patricia Kalitzke and Lloyd Bogle left Pete's Drive-In for the last time, the Cascade County Sheriff's Office announced publicly that they had identified the most likely suspect in their deaths. It was, investigators believe, the oldest cold case in the United States ever resolved using forensic genealogy. The case was formally closed. "This is as good as we're ever going to get on a case like this," said Sheriff Jesse Slaughter. Bogle's brother had grown into a man, had built a life, had become, by all accounts, successful. But his wife told investigators something that stayed with Cadner. She said he still struggled with it for most of his life, Cadner recalled. Not having the answers. Not having the closure. Carrying the weight of that cold January morning in Montana across decades, across states, across the entirety of a life otherwise well-lived. Somewhere in the Cascade County Sheriff's Office, a microscopic slide still exists. A glass rectangle smaller than a playing card, containing a single preserved sperm cell collected in 1956. It sat in a box for 45 years. It outlasted the assumptions of every investigator who doubted the case could be closed. It outlasted Kenneth Gould himself by 14 years. It waited with a patience that only objects possess, while the people who needed it most spent their lives inside the question it could answer. The slide did not grieve. It did not hope. It simply preserved the truth until the world was ready to read it. Patricia Kalitzke was 16 years old. She was bubbly, witty, and beautiful. She was a junior in high school. She had sat in the warm light of a drive-in with a young man who was, by every account, completely in love with her. Lloyd Bogle was 18 years old, far from Texas, stationed in a town he had not planned on, until he met someone who made him want to stay. What happened to them was not inevitable. It was not the consequence of anything they did, or were, or chose. It was the result of one man's violence, in the dark, on a cold Montana night. A man who rode horses through the hills. A man who looked ordinary. A man whose name no one thought to write down. The answer was always there, encoded in something smaller than anything visible to the naked eye, waiting 65 years to say what it knew. And when technology finally gave it a voice, the only sound it made was a name. If this story stayed with you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to know that truth, no matter how long it takes, has a way of surviving. For every family still waiting on a cold case anywhere in the world, and there are thousands, this case is a reminder. Evidence preserved with care and science pursued with patience can bring answers across decades. If you know something about an unsolved case in your community, contact your local law enforcement. Cold cases are not closed because they are old. They are closed because someone refused to stop asking.